Let's talk about glands. What are glands? Glands are groups of cells that create a secretion that then is released somewhere. In this case, we're going to talk about exocrine glands. The X in exocrine means outside. So these are distinguished from endocrine glands that secrete into the bloodstream inside the body. Exocrine glands are going to secrete to the outside of the body, either the surface of the skin or usually somewhere in the digestive system, such as the mouth with salivary glands or pancreatic glands that secrete into the small intestine. So when we look at these multicellular exocrine glands, what we see is this bulbous part that's called an acinus that actually contains the cells that make the secretion and build those up in their cells before releasing it. Those are connected to a duct lined with simple cuboidal epithelium. And it's very common to have either simple or stratified cuboidal epithelium in the walls of ducts in a multicellular gland. And then in a lot of glands, what we see is this kind of structure where we have many of these little acini with their ducts, and those ducts feed into larger ducts which flow together to create even larger ducts, etc., until we get to the duct that actually releases the secretions outside. Now there are three kinds of glands, and they are distinguished by the way they secrete their contents. Merocrine glands are the simplest. They're just going to build up secretions in vesicles and secrete using exocytosis. How cool is it? You know what that word means. How fun is this, right? One of the things I love about anatomy is that as you're studying, you're learning so many terms, and then you come across them again, you're like, I know what that means. Or you're like, I don't remember what that means, but I know it's in my notes somewhere. So these cells are, because they are just doing exocytosis, the cell itself is not damaged by producing and releasing the secretion. And if you're thinking like, what do you mean? Like, what else would they do? Hang on, we're going to talk about some other kinds that do damage the cell. So Merocrine glands are most of the sweat glands in your skin, and they're producing secretory vesicles that actually don't really have proteins in them. There aren't very many proteins in your sweat. What they have is mostly water, some ions from salts, and a few metabolic waste products. Don't think that you're going to detoxify yourself by sweating. You're going to detoxify yourself because you have a liver and kidneys. You will feel better after sweating because your muscles are going to be more relaxed, but you won't detoxify. Your sweat doesn't remove that many toxins. Your tear glands that create your tears in your eyes, these are also merocrine glands. The gastric glands in the stomach, which we'll talk about when we do the digestive system. So these are really simple. Just build up little secretions in little, package them in vesicles, do exocytosis, and the contents of those vesicles then are released through the duct. Now, another kind is apocrine glands. Apo, again, comes from that apex prefix. So these are going to actually remove the apical side of the cell. So these cells build up the secretion within the cytoplasm, move it to the apex of the cell, and then pinch off like the whole apex of the cell. Like part of the cell is actually removed. So remember, when we do exocytosis, the vesicle fuses with the plasma membrane. The only thing that's released is the secretion. In this case, part of the membrane is going to be released, and it's big enough that it's called a vacuole. So the secretions from apocrine glands do contain more fats, if only because they contain part of the plasma membrane. So some of your sweat glands, especially in the armpits and the groin area, these are apocrine sweat glands. So the rest of your sweat glands from the rest of your skin, those are merocrine sweat glands. We'll come back to this when we do the integumentary system. The mammary glands are also apocrine glands. And that's why mother's milk contains a lot of fat, because these cells build up fat within the cells and then pinch off that fat plus the plasma membrane of those cells. So those are apocrine glands. Finally, the last kind are called holocrine glands. Holo means whole or entire. So these cells are going to build up whatever their secretion is inside the plasma membrane, inside the cytoplasm of the cell, and then the whole cell disintegrates. It's just going to break up into a bunch of different pieces, and those pieces are going to be secreted. So the secretion is the cell fragments, the secretion, whatever the synthesized product is, and all of the parts of the cells, all the organelles, all of that stuff. That is all produced or released in these holocrine gland cells. So the oil-producing glands in your skin, they're called sebaceous glands because the oil is called sebum, and those cells those glands are holocrine glands. So one of the reasons that people get acne is that these bits are so big that they sometimes get stuck in the duct, or because these sebaceous glands are especially at the root of hairs in the skin, they get trapped along the hair follicle and don't get released. That can then cause an infection, which is what angry acne is. So that's an oversimplification of acne, but that's one of the causes of acne. So 3 types of glands. Holocrine glands burst the whole cell. Apocrine glands release the apex of the cell. Merocrine glands do exocytosis. So that's your introduction to glands.